One of the things that I love most about making these videos for the Monster Bass channel and for you is taking techniques, lures, etc. that I previously had no confidence in whatsoever. And through my on the water experience, gained a lot of confidence in them, and then coming back and sharing with you what I've learned, why I believe the particular technique or lure works so well, how to make sure that you can go make the most out of it to help you catch fish. And today, that lure and that technique is the Lipless Crankbait is the lure, and the technique is the yo-yo or yo-yoing, the lipless crank. Something I used to not have confidence at all. Now I actually really like to do it, especially in these colder months. So let's break it down and talk about it today in this video. All right, guys, so welcome back to the Monster Bass channel. My name is Jeremy Francis. I run the channel and the page called Fishing and LoneStar. Would love to have you come follow, subscribe, or do whatever it is that you do on the social media platform that you do it on. But today, you're on YouTube and you're watching the Monster Bass channel, so make sure you subscribe right here to the Monster Bass channel as we talk about different lures and techniques to help you go catch more fish and bigger fish around the water. Now today we're talking about the Lipless Crankbait. I want to talk about a couple of different ones and when to choose the particular lipless that you might be using. But more importantly, we're going to talk about the retrieve and how to make the most from this lure to help you catch more fish when you're out and about. So first, let's talk about the lipless crank that I use quite a bit, maybe the top couple. The most important part of this video though is the retrieval. So I'm gonna get to an on the water video in a moment and show you what that looks like. But really quickly, one of the ones I like to use the most is the red eye shad. A couple of reasons why is because there's a large variation of colors in that particular lure, the red eye shad by Strike King. There's also multiple different variations between a 2-tap, a 1-tap, more of a BB or a rattle version. So there's multiple different versions. And so this particular one you'll notice is a 2-tap. All that means is the sound is more of a just because there's two BBs inside of it, it's just two of them tapping together. It's a little bit more of a thud sound than a rattle sound that you may be used to in the traditional rattle trap style of lipless. That's just what I have tied on right now is the 2-tap. I use both, but I like the red eye shad just because of the variations. However, one that I've come to like, and yes, this is a plug for Monster Bass, but it's also true, is the Incision 69 by Monster Bass. And you may say, okay, well, why this one versus the red eye shad? When do I reach for each one? Well, I want to show you some differences between these two that make them different, because one would say, oh, a lipless crank is a lipless crank. But first is look at the width of these two. All right, you'll notice that the red eye shad is much wider. Let me move the line to the side, but it's much wider, not much, but a good bit wider than the Incision 69 by Monster Bass. Okay, now these are about the same in length. I didn't actually measure these, but they're about the same length and a little bit of the same profile, but the width is much different. The sound as well from the Incision 69, I'll show you. It's very, very faint. Now there's still a sound there. It's not silent. There's still a sound there, but the Incision 69 is a little bit of a mix between, in my opinion, a lipless crankbait and, say for example, a blade bait. But how I use one versus the other, let me put the red eye shad back on my rod as I can't deal with this many treble hooks in my hand at the same time. I'm gonna get one like seriously in my hand. All right, so now we got that down. The Incision 69 by Monster Bass. One thing I do like about it and the way I use it is a little bit more of a finesse style lipless crank, all right? Because it is narrower, this one is going to run really tight, all right? Now, a lipless crank in general is meant to run tight, but the Incision 69 from Monster Bass I have found runs even tighter. There's still a really good amount of vibration that comes from this lure, but it's a little bit tighter wobble, and because of the sound, there is a sound chamber, but because the sound isn't as loud, it's a little bit more of what I would consider like a finesse type of lipless crank. So on really high pressure days where I'm maybe just not catching as many fish as I would like, or if I'm fishing a particular body of water that's really pressured, I'm gonna go with, first of all, I may try the 2-tap just because it's a different sound than the high rattling chambers that most lipless cranks have. But if that doesn't work, then I'm going to switch to a tighter running lipless in the Incision 69, and one that doesn't emit as much sound. And I have caught some pretty good fish with the Incision 69 as well. All right, so let's talk about the gear, and then we're going to get into the retrieval, and I'm going to show you an on-the-water video and a catch to help us break that down. All right, really quickly on the gear, I like to use, this is a 7.5 to 1 gear ratio reel, as noted here. This is the Lose KBD LFS. It's a great kind of medium budget reel, but I can cast really well with it. I can cast pretty far with it. And on this one, I do have 12-pound fluorocarbon that is on the reel here. You can use 12-pound, you can use 14-pound. I mean, heck, if you're bank fishing and you want to keep this lipless crank high in the water column, you can even use a 17-pound fluorocarbon. I wouldn't recommend it a ton, but 12 to 14 is fine in terms of your fluorocarbon that you're going to use. And for the rod, I would highly recommend using a medium to medium heavy, but a moderate action. You want something that's going to have a lot of parabolic bend in the rod. This is going to help those treble hooks stay pinned. When you land a fish, or I'm sorry, when you hook the fish, it's going to stay pinned in the fish's mouth so that you actually get the fish to the boat or to the bank and you actually land it. So medium to medium heavy, moderate action rod, anywhere in that 7 to 7.4 range in terms of length is really going to help you cast really well, but also when you hook into the fish, get it in, keep those treble hooks in the fish's mouth and get that fish to you. I can't emphasize enough, moderate action is extremely helpful when throwing crankbaits, and the lipless is no exception to that. All right, now let's get back to the on the water video, and we're going to talk about the yo-yo technique, because ultimately what you're trying to mimic is a fleeing bait fish that's also then kind of dying down and fleeing again and then kind of dying down. And almost always when you're doing that, you're going to get a bite when the lure settles back down, not necessarily when you're ripping up. However, if you're fishing over grass, right, and you're hitting the tops of grass, on that rip up, you will get a reaction out of the grass to get the bite. But if you're just fishing in open water around rocks, around any type of riprap, bridge pilings, etc., you're gonna probably get more bites on the fall than you are on the rip up. That's just at least my experience. But the yo-yo technique literally is, you can kind of point in the general direction of your lure. I kind of like to hold my rod at about this angle, not necessarily right at the lure, but about this angle. And I like to kind of reel, pop up twice, point my rod tip back down and reel in the slack, pop up, point my rod tip down, reel in the slack. You'll see in this video, that's what I'm doing. And as I'm working that lipless back to the boat, in this video, I'm actually fishing right over some lily pad stems, and that's when the fish bites, is on the rip up. You can see me kind of react to that. In this particular case as well, I do boat flip the fish on a moderate action rod with treble hooks. I would not recommend that. This is actually about a 4.5-pound bass. So not huge, but not small. I would not recommend boat flipping that fish. However, I will say in general though, that's where your moderate power rod, moderate action rod is gonna come in handy, is keeping that fish pinned. Although I do not recommend boat flipping that fish. So again, you're gonna cast out, you're gonna begin your retrieve, pop once or twice with your rod, okay, up to almost right straight up in the air, and then quickly point it back down and reel in your slack and pop again. Now you can do this over 1 to 2 foot of water. You can let it sink more and do this in 8 to 10 foot of water. The speed in which you retrieve and also the speed in which you point your rod tip back down and reel in the slack. If you go slower, it's going to allow that lure to sink more. The difference with the lipless crank versus a normal crankbaits float. Lipless crankbait sinks, all right? So a little bit difference, but you can then manage the depth that this lure is going to run by your retrieval speed, by your hopping speed, by how much you let that lure sink or drop again before you reel in your slack and pop it back up. But that's at least how I like to work it. And again, I can do that in 1 to 2 foot of water over a flat, or I can do it in 8 to 10 foot of water and let that lure get deeper. Now, a lot of people do use lipless cranks around grass. I don't fish a whole lot of grass lakes. There are some in East Texas, And that's where you can then rip it out, especially in a hydrilla. So a lipless crank comes out of hydrilla really well. You basically want to hit the tops of the grass and rip it back out. You'll get that reaction bite. But don't be afraid if you're fishing from the bank. Don't be afraid to throw this from the bank. You can fish it from the bank. Just fish it a little bit faster. You'll get some reaction bites, and I promise you're going to catch some good fish out of a pond or small lake if you're fishing from the bank. So feel free, or not feel free, but just don't shy away from throwing the lipless crank when you're bank fishing as well. All right, guys, so as with any video, we try to keep them brief, to the point, simple, but yet effective. But if you have any questions at all, feel free to drop the comments below. We will come back. I do respond to as many of them as I can. Right here on the Monster Bass channel, we're gonna bring you lots of videos. We're gonna continue to help you catch fish, to make the most out of your time on the water, teach you how to use the lures we're putting in your box. So make sure you're subscribed right here to the Monster Bass channel. And be sure you follow along for more. So hit the notification bell so you're aware of when those videos come out. And let us know there's something else we can do for you in terms of video content. And myself, and the team will make sure we get that out for you. And as always, Monster Bass, make sure you get out there and go catch one.